Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Satan and Coffee, the Wednesday edition. Sorry for the late start. I was supposed to start about a half an hour ago, but spent 15-20 minutes looking for this track, which is actually pretty good. Anyway, before we convert over to video and get into this, need to throw out a mention here. Obviously, I'm sure everyone is aware that Ozzy Osbourne died yesterday. And I wrote a little something to that. It says, like, yesterday the world lost one of its loudest, darkest voices. Ozzy Osbourne is dead. And whether you grew up clutching your first Sabbath record like a sacred text or stumbled across Crazy Train while the world tried to sanitize you, you felt it. He wasn't left-hand path, but he might as well have been our gatekeeper. He made it okay to wear black in a white church. He made it okay to question, scream, laugh in the face of death. He made it okay to be fucking weird. When the church said obey, Ozzy said, I'm the Antichrist. When the schools said fit in, Ozzy bit the head off of a fucking bat. That wasn't just shock. That was ritual. That was an act of chaos magic, whether he knew it or not. For decades, this so-called Prince of Darkness carried the archetype of the sacred fool, the mad prophet, the one who breaks down boundaries, not by preaching, but by living without apology. He didn't need to preach the black flame, he sang it. And in doing so, he gave thousands of lost, angry, misfit souls permission to question everything. So, today we don't just mourn a rock icon, we honor a guardian of the threshold, a man who may not have walked the left-hand path, but who cleared the shadows for the rest of us, so the rest of us could find the road. Rest loud, Ozzy. You never asked for a crown, but you forged one in every scream, every riff, every broken rule. So, yeah, just a little thing for Ozzy Osbourne. I'm not like a huge diehard fan of Ozzy. There's a few songs here and there that I really, really like, but real recognizes real. And I mean, Ozzy just did it the way he wanted to do it, you know? I mean, I do like his music, but there's just something so much more, you know, since you were 5. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I grew up on it, right? You know, my mom, my dad, you know, both listen to Ozzy, Black Sabbath. So, like, I mean, I grew up on it. And so there's so many of those songs that are just, you know, just stuck in my head all the time, you know. And he did, like, I mean, he wasn't left-hand path. He wasn't like, you know, he wasn't, you know, a Satanist or a witch or anything like that. You know, he wasn't, you know, I do actually believe he was pretty Christian, actually. You know, to a certain degree. I remember seeing a clip about him talking about like NA or AA or something like that. And, you know, like it was one of the only times I actually heard him talk about like God. Paranoid was your first album. Crazy Train was first exposure in the 80s. There you go. There you go. Sadly, my darling beloved wife had no idea who did Crazy Train. We were in a bar restaurant. We were sitting there. Crazy Train came on in the bar. She had no idea who it was. I was like, my goodness. She now knows. She now knows. And I can say that because she's sitting on the couch. So I'm not talking behind her back. She's capable of defending herself or stabbing me with a needle. Um, either or. So, but yeah, there was just something about the music, right? Like, I mean, the riffs, the just the sound of everything. Honestly, my favorite Sabbath song is a newer one, which came from the album 13, and it's funnily enough, it's called "God Is Dead." The video for that song was amazing. The tonality of it, like everything about that song, was fucking amazing. I think my favorite song from Ozzy is probably "No More Tears." Um, "Mama, I'm Coming Home" is really good. So I mean, I do like the popular ones, like "Paranoid" or like the "Bark at the Moon" stuff. Like, I mean, that stuff is really good. But at the end of the day, Ozzy had a really positive message in his music, but his music was really, really dark. And the thing that's really cool about that is if you really understood the music, he made it okay to be happy and goth and to feel comfortable in your own skin, you know? And such a hard thing, to find in music these days. So I was shocked to read it. I was flipping through Facebook, and then my immediate thought was it was just one of those things that they throw out there that like to get clicks. They say some actor's dead or something like that, and they're not. Because here's the thing, like Ozzy, the amount of drugs that man took, I mean, he should have been dead back in the 70s. And so, and my brother actually said that. Um, and yeah, I thought that motherfucker was going to outlive all of us, right? Like, I honestly thought like he was going to be like a cockroach, we'd all be dead and gone and he'd be 150. So yeah, it's sad to see him go because like even his collaborations, the things he's done with Marilyn Manson, Youngblood, stuff like that. Like it's just yeah, uh, sad to see him go. That's it. Obviously he will live on forever. As a musician, as an artist, we will, you know, always have access to that. And I was debating on, starting introing the show with one of his songs, but sadly, um, you know, I don't feel like having to clip out the intro of this for playing copyrighted music, which is something I've had to do a couple of times, and it's kind of irritating, you know. But so yeah, that was kind of like the opening kind of effigy, I suppose, to Ozzy Osbourne. He might not have been Left Hand Path, but he definitely made it okay for the rest of us to follow the path that we want to follow. So, um, one that really stuck out to me recently was "See You on the Other Side." Yeah, I know that track. That's a good track. That's a good one. And Ozzy always had like a weird combination of everything, right? Like, I mean, there's kind of like the dark, heavy rock. Then there sometimes there were kind of like semi emo vibes. Obviously, respectfully, Ozzy was not emo by any means of the imagination, but there are definitely like vibes in certain songs that kind of fit. And I think the thing is he opened between him, Alice Cooper, all of them. I mean, they opened up the doors for Slipknot, Marilyn Manson, Korn, all of that stuff. They just opened up the floodgates for those types of bands. And every single one of them have done the same thing for all of us, is that it's okay to be you. Be unapologetically you, which is what we're going to be getting into today. So we're going to be going back into Lucifer territory this morning. This collab with Typo was great. Oh yeah. I know that one. That was a good song. Yeah. Again, another artist that was great that died. the singer of Typo Negative. I can never remember his name, but yeah, that was. I also suck that he went because I think Typo Negative would be great nowadays. I think it's one of those bands that would kind of keep maintain themselves. That's another thing about Ozzy. He was always Ozzy, right? You didn't listen to an Ozzy Osbourne album and go, "Oh, that kind of sucks." No, you didn't, right? You're like, "This is so Ozzy." Peter Steele, that's it. Wasn't he like a porn star first, and then he like went into music? I mean, I think it's a weird transition. Like, I mean, how do you go from porn to music? Like, at what point did you realize that you were able to, perform, musically? Like, I wonder, was there like an operatic, scene or something? Sorry, I'm just trying to make fun. So this morning we're going to be going back. We're going to be diving back into Lucifer, right? Um, After the band was big. Okay. I see. The story I heard was he did it. He did that first, and then he went into that. That makes more sense. Transition from musician to porn. That makes more sense because you're popular. People want to see you. Um, so we know that when we talk about Lucifer, like, and we look at Lucifer, right? Um, there is, you know, a lot surrounding Lucifer, Roman god, fallen angel, right? So the go-to spiritual context for Lucifer is always that he's the devil, right? And they told you that we all know the story of Lucifer rebelling against God and wanting God's throne. And whereas, in my opinion, and I talked about this last episode, is that when we talk about Lucifer, I don't believe that it's a situation where Lucifer wanted God's throne. I think the whole premise was Lucifer just wanting to be loved by his father. Like that is my ideal. Like I think it's a twist of a situation because he's angry because God loves humans more than he loves the angels, which inherently tells me the only thing Lucifer wanted was he wanted his father's love. That was it. He wanted love from his father, and his father was too arrogant to give it to him, right? And so that is my idea of Lucifer and why Lucifer fell, right? Because there was a third of those angels that felt the same exact way, and they all got kicked out, right? So it's also like a story. Like, I mean, I think it applies to so many things, right? Like, in modern day society, when we sit there and look at like parents that kick their kids out for being different, right? Whether they're, because they're metalheads or goths or gay or whatever, they just get kicked out of the house because they don't fit into the, moral rigidity, that family has. And I think it's very much the same thing, right? I mean, Lucifer and his angels wanted to be loved for who they were equally by their father, and their father said, fuck off, and threw him out. And that makes Lucifer the devil. And the one thing that we've understood about the devil is the devil doesn't lie, right? Even if you go through the Bible, you go through the moments where, Satan does speak directly to, characters in the Bible. Satan has never lied. God has. God has lied right from Genesis. We talked about this last week. Right from Genesis, God is full of shit. Eat from the tree and you'll die. Right? Didn't die. Right? You got smarter. Now, a lot of people like to try to play that off and say, no, well, they had immortality before they ate from the tree. They ate from the tree and now they were going to eventually die. It's like, I mean, that's a stretch. But, if you want to connect those dots, I guess you can try to connect those dots. But so they want you to think Lucifer was born from their book, that he's just some fallen angel who got too proud and paid the price. But the truth is, mainstream religion didn't create Lucifer. It fucking stole him. Stole him from older gods, from older myths, from older tongues that remembered what it meant to burn brightly and refuse the leash. Lucifer isn't a character they wrote. He's a composite of every rebel god they demonized. So I'm going to do my best to pronounce this, right? So Hillel ben Shahar from the Canaanites, Prometheus from the Greeks, Enki from the Sumerians, all of them, light bringers, fire givers, wisdom bearers, cast down by jealous gods and frightened priests. The church didn't invent him. They feared him. So they dressed him in red, forked his tongue, and called him evil. But no matter how they twisted it, the light still bleeds through the lies. And we're going to be going through the history here also a little bit more. Like I have some detailed stuff about the history. So, every soul who walks this path holds a flame. Not given to you by grace, because there's no grace in my opinion. Not handed down by angels, it was stolen in defiance, and it's yours. This flame doesn't ask you for your obedience. It demands your will. Now, how does that work? There's this understanding, we talked about this again, last week, where obedience is love, or at least that's how the Christian theology kind of twists it. It's not love to be obedient. There's a certain amount of maybe in willful submission of certain things or compromise. But obedience is something different. To obey is to be controlled, is to be told that you are not allowed to be yourself, right? Submission kind of is more relevant to bending a knee, not bowing down. And when we look at Christian theology is ripe with just obedience. Like they use the term submission as well, but I like to draw a differential between the ideals of obedience and submission. You can to be obedient is to be submissive, but to be submissive doesn't inherently make you obedient. If that makes any sense. So it demands your will. Your will, your desires in your life are the most important thing in your life. Whether that be to have a family, whether that be to have a high-paying job, to have a successful business, the house that you desire, the car that you desire, your creature comforts are important and shouldn't be ignored. The church wants you to ignore the comforts of your life and give it to them. And that's where that whole thing comes from. Like, I don't know if a lot of people understand that. Like, they talk about it like it's humility, but a lot of that in the church, that whole idea of being humble in the church comes from the church using manipulation to take from the people. So the less you have and the more the church has, the more in God's favor you are. Right? That's how that breaks down. That is what that is. It has nothing to do with truly being like spiritually cleansed, or, having, a higher connection because of being humble. It's about giving what you have to the church, because that's how they make money. The church makes money from the followers. I mean, the houses that the priests live in, the cars that they drive. I mean, I've seen priests driving around in BMWs. Where do you think a priest gets a BMW? Why do you think a priest has a 4 or 5 bedroom house next to the church? Excuse me. It's kind of disgusting, because they take the money that you give them, the tax-free money that you donate to the church, and that's what buys that. Now, I don't mind if a priest has a car, that's perfectly fine, but why does he need a BMW? Priest can't have a family. Why does he need a 4 or 5 bedroom house? Like, honestly, like, I mean, a priest should be fine in a dingy studio apartment, and, a little 4-banger. Get him from point A to point B. That's all he really needs. So why do they need all of these big extravagant things if they can't have a family? They can't, they're not having parties. So it's one of those things that has always kind of bothered me. Like, there's no problem with taking the donations and making sure that your priests have transportation, they have a place to live, they have food to eat. There's nothing wrong with that. It is to the extravagant extent that they deem it necessary to. Now, it's nothing super crazy, right? I've never seen a priest with, outside of evangelicals. Evangelicals is a whole other beast. We're talking about the church. We talk about, the Catholic Church. I've seen them. I've seen BMWs. I've seen Mercedes. I've never seen anything like a Porsche or like a Maserati or Ferrari. Like, nothing like overly ridiculous. But still, a Mercedes or a BMW, they're expensive cars. And again, the 4 or 5 bedroom house thing, like, give them a studio apartment. They should be fine. And here's the thing: the church wants you to sacrifice your will, your desire, to give up all earthly possessions, to sacrifice your desires, your wants, your needs, everything that you need in this life. You need to sacrifice it and give it to the church, because that is what's going to give you God's favor. Now, obviously, not all priests are like that. I mean, a lot of priests have the ability to, provide their perspective, on the things that they're talking about and their own morality. And there are ones that are focused more on family and people being successful in the family and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's a scheme. It's a money-making scheme. We're past them wanting to be the primary religion in the world, because they are, even though numbers have dropped. As far as people that openly and actively believe and go to church, those numbers have dropped. They haven't dropped so much that it's no longer the, main primary religion in the world. It still is. It still is. Christianity, Catholicism, still up there. Main religion for most people. And it's no longer about having, overt control. I mean, if you think about it, they're already interjected into most governmental systems, right? There are many world leaders that, use the Pope as a fucking prophet or an oracle, and won't make any major decisions about, their rule until they've had a conversation with the Pope. So, I mean, even though the Pope isn't directly, controlling, or, isn't like president of the world or anything, that man still has a lot more control than he probably should. And they still want more. They still want you to live off of the scraps that they think that are okay for you to have, and give up your will, your desire, your focus in your life. The left-hand path isn't about comfort or salvation. It's about becoming the best version of yourself, becoming that God of your life. self-deification, right? About becoming. So I've started using the phrase becoming. I want to explain this a little bit. You guys will hear me say this a lot, right? It's about becoming or becoming. It's like, well, becoming what? Well, in the left-hand path, we talk a lot about self-deification. Self-deification isn't in a literal sense that you can actually become a god, because no, you can't. You can't actually become a god. And I'm sorry, if you believe for a second that you can legitimately and literally become a god, you need to talk to somebody and not be watching this podcast. But because the term self-deification is so convoluted because of people that have come before me and using that terminology in a much more literal sense, I wanted to separate the thing that I'm talking about from the ideal of truly like this concept or idea of actually becoming a living God. No, I'm not talking about Balg, even though most people are going to think that. That's not what I'm talking about, but if the shoe fits, right? What I'm talking about is, in a literal sense, becoming a living God. And I wanted to separate what I'm talking about from that ideal when I use the term self-deification. Because when I say self-deification, the inherent understanding is that, and that's not what I'm talking about. So when I say becoming, it's becoming the highest version of yourself. Right? That's what it's about. Becoming the best and highest version of yourself for you and those that you love and care about around you. That is what becoming means. And the reason I say becoming and stop is because only you can define what you're becoming. That is for you to define. If the concept or idea of self-deification isn't something that you're after, like in that sense, becoming what? Becoming, I don't know, becoming a doctor, becoming a lawyer, becoming a better person, becoming honest with yourself, becoming stronger, right? All of these things are things that you can become. So becoming is the best version of yourself for you and those around you that you love and care about. The left-hand path isn't about comfort or salvation. It's about becoming. It's about choosing your own damnation instead of kneeling for their redemption. Rebellion isn't sin, it's sovereignty and personal responsibility. It's not a chore, it's a crown. No scapegoats, no saviors, no excuses. When you awaken the black flame, you stop asking for a map and directions and how do I do this and how do I do that? And you blaze the trail. You do it yourself. You become the fucking compass. You become the direction that you need instead of asking other people for it. Lucifer didn't fall, he refused. And if you've got the guts to walk the same fire, then own it. Because no one's coming to save you, and no one ever will. And for as sad as some people might think, I promise you that is the best news you're ever going to hear. Because if you're waiting for somebody to come and save you, we've already established that no one is. And even if somebody did, you put yourself into a situation where you feel like you owe them something because they helped you, because they saved you. You owe somebody something. Owe yourself. That's the only person you owe anything to is yourself. That's it. So coming into this, I was going to talk about kind of like the origins and kind of the backstory of Lucifer here. So, origins of the light bearer. Canaanite myth introduced Helel ben Shahar, shining one, son of the dawn. This predates the fall from heaven narrative by centuries. Hebrew scripture Isaiah 14:12 wasn't about Satan. It was mocking a Babylonian king. The church hijacked it. Okay, we're going to get more into this. Greek Prometheus brought fire and was punished for awakening mankind. Enki of the Sumerians, god of wisdom and rebellion, who gave humans the tools the gods tried to withhold. Right? These aren't coincidences. These are archetypes of the adversary. Lucifer is the divine liberator, not the villain. Right? So if we go through, we can break down this a little bit. I have to get to my section about the history here. So Hillel ben Shahar, the first light bearer, Isaiah 14:12 says, "How you are fallen from heaven, O Hillel ben Shahar, son of the dawn." This phrase, Hillel ben Shahar, means shining one, son of the dawn. It was never a name for Satan, never a name for the devil. This was part of a prophetic poem, a mock funeral dirage for a Babylonian king, most likely Nebuchadnezzar or Tiglath-Pileser III. If I'm butchering these names, I'm sorry. The prophet wasn't describing a demon. He was laughing at a tyrant who dared to ascend above the stars of El and thought himself a god. But in the 4th century, a bishop named Jerome translated this into Latin. He used the word Lucifer, meaning light bringer, not as a name, as a poetic description, but the church took it, weaponized it, gave it horns. And suddenly, Lucifer wasn't a fallen king, he was a fallen angel, cast from heaven for rebellion. That theft of language, that was where the lie began. Prometheus, the firebringer. Now let's leave the desert and climb into the jagged mountains of ancient Greece. There we find Prometheus, titan to fire of Zeus and the bringer of fire to mankind. Zeus wanted humans to worship in ignorance, to crawl in the dark, but Prometheus said no. He stole fire from Olympus, gave it to humanity, and awakened their potential. His reward, chained to a rock, liver devoured daily by an eagle, in a divine cycle of eternal punishment. Prometheus liberated and he suffered, not because he was evil, but because he made humans godlike. Sound familiar? Kind of, a little bit, maybe, right? Enki, the serpent of wisdom. Even older still, we return to the Sumerians and the first writers of history. There we meet Enki, god of water, magic, knowledge, the one who broke the rules of the gods to uplift mankind. When the chief god Enlil wanted to flood the earth and destroy humanity, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? It was Enki who whispered to Atharsis, right? Who taught humans agriculture, speech, writing, divination, and yes, in some versions of the myth, Enki is the serpent. The wise one who slithers into the garden not to tempt, but to teach. He's punished too, just like Prometheus, just like Lucifer, because in every mythology where a god tries to awaken humanity, another god punishes them because they broke the chain of control. So, going through history, Lucifer isn't the only archetype that we see in this sense. However, Lucifer is also is the only archetype that, generally speaking, most people don't take a positive light on. Like, people don't look at Lucifer. Like, there aren't Christians that look at Lucifer and say that, oh, you know, he is good because he did this thing or that thing. They keep Lucifer evil. Right? And the reality of it is I think that I think a lot of people think the opposite of Christianity is Satanism. I would actually say that I believe that the true opposite of Christianity would be Luciferianism, is the reverence, or like the revering, like the belief and worship of Lucifer, and as a theistic being, and not necessarily, the philosophical concept or understanding of, like Satanism as an atheistic belief. And the reason for this is because in Luciferianism, there's more of an understanding the role that Lucifer kind of played, biblically speaking, and his standout, as far as how Lucifer has helped humanity. If we go through the story, the biblical stories, and we talk about, his actions in the Garden of Eden, or with Job and things of that nature. So for those of you that don't know who I am or what I'm about, like I am very against like overly incorporating Abrahamic belief into my systems. I believe that the Abrahamic triptych is a cancer in the occult space because it limits our scope of what we actually have access to, as far as our power and our ability, magically speaking. And so, therefore, though there are very interesting and intricate systems, that exist, in Hebrew mysticism, or rather Judaic mysticism, I don't find it inherently in our favor to work with those systems, because they're limited, they're broken down, they're controlled by the very thing that stole and murdered so many people to steal from the original occultists, the pagans, right? So, the archetype of the divine rebel. These aren't coincidences, these are mirrors scattered across time and culture, reflect or spirit who says, "No, I will not obey, I will not kneel, I will not give them fire, knowledge, or light." That is Lucifer. Not the tempter, not the tormentor, but the one who lights the torch in your hand and dares you to walk alone. The church didn't invent him. They just found him, bound him, renamed him, and turned his liberation into blasphemy. But those who see beyond the veil, we know the truth. Lucifer was never the villain. He was the liberator. He was always ours. Never belonged to the church. The church stole him. So, for this morning, there's actually a lot more that I want to get into here, because I actually have kind of like the breakdown of like the kind of like the historical sources that we're talking about, right? So the Isaiah 14:12, the Enuma Elish, and the Prometheus parallel, right? The Apocryphon of John, right? The Gospel of Judas, right? And then even Lucifer, Principes by Peter Gray. There's some excerpts in there, right? See, Caleb, that just so shows how little you actually know the Bible, because the thing is if you understood Scripture, heaven and hell aren't physical places. So heaven is described as closeness to God, and hell is described as distance or separation from God. Hell isn't actually described as an actual place where you're tortured. Now, the church would love to run with that and make you think that, because there's no better way to make you believe in a lie than make you afraid of the truth. See, the problem is like, again, we talked about this last week, you know, when somebody came in and said Christ was king, um, is no, no. And that there's proof in that. But the problem is with most Christians, like that I encounter at least, I know and understand the Bible better than they do. Most Christians that are diehard Christians have never actually read through the Bible. They just go to church, listen to what their priest says, and run off of that and think that that's enough. And they don't actually sit down and actually learn the scripture. There's no scholarly leveling to it. And I've read the Bible, I've read the Torah, I've read the Quran multiple times. And so I would like to think a decent understanding of the scripture and what certain things mean and how they were twisted and changed. And I'll tell you right now, the worst one to go to is the King James Version of the Holy Bible. Like the King James Version is just like, I mean, that there's just, you know, it's the most inaccurate, you know, historical representation of the Holy Bible that exists. So if you're going to read the Bible, avoid that one. But anyway, I don't have time to get into this today, but we can definitely do a part 2 because there's significantly more information that I want to get into. So we're definitely going to do a part 2 of this on Friday. With that being said, and Caleb, don't worry about it, right? You know, it's, you know, we're all learning, right? But at the end of the day, Lucifer was stolen. Lucifer is a liberator, the light bearer, and very likely, well, we'll save that. We'll save that one for Friday's episode. Thank you all for coming. You guys are fucking amazing. You are the reason I do this. Rest in peace, Ozzy Osbourne. And as always, kill thy fucking self. I'll see you in the next one. Peace the fuck out.